So what hasn't Israel been accused of over the past 2 years? Starvation, war crimes, genocide, targeting of so-called hospital staff and journalists. And as Elaine from Seinfeld would say, fake, 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 fake. Yep, and the fake just keeps on sailing.
Just got hit. The vessel is on fire. Our vessel is on fire.
The family boat has been officially attacked. A drone came right above it, released a bomb, and it exploded, and the boat was on fire. They have bombed a boat once again with civilians on it.
The theatrical antics of the flotilla drama queens, of course, gained immediate headlines the world over, as the New York Times, the BBC, CNN, The Independent, and all the usual suspects spread the report without verification or waiting for the truth to emerge. In the process, of course, the incident was used to continue the campaign of defaming Israel and framing it in a negative light in the items that were published. It doesn't matter that within a few hours, the Tunisian authorities who investigated the incident reported that it was not a drone, but actually an accident caused by a cigarette of one of the travelers on the flotilla. But the headlines are still there, framing the reality. But are we really surprised by this? These clowns and their lies are just another element of the whole charade, the whole lie that is the cause they support, fitting in perfectly with the other lies being told. But to the media, it makes no difference. They continue spreading the lies and the accusations. Even when videos like this, disproving the claim of hunger, come out of Gaza. Oh, the horror. So even with videos like this coming out, they will continue with the false narratives. Or invent something new. Like here, they can make the accusation that Israel is committing cholesterol-cide, which brings out all the virtue-signaling Michiganers to see the light.
Just walking around my small town in a keffiyeh with a Protect the Palestinians homemade tank top. This is not the light. This is the light. Yes, hello, Southern Oregon. Free Palestine. Thank you.
So when you have a fake cause for a fake people supported by fakes like this Freddie Mercury de la Schmata here, why would they not fake the news? Hi, I'm Danny Seaman, and you're watching Straight Up on JNS TV, coming to you from Jerusalem, Israel. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine all the people living in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Well, I'm not one, but there are many of them out there claiming to be, like those Michiganers on the flotilla for sure. Probably also claiming they had nothing to kill or die for, but violently protesting from the river to the sea. This while supporting terrorists and hailing murderous jihadists and making your lives miserable at the same time. We in Israel, we've been there. We have the imagination of those carried away with the Leninist dreams imposed upon us. 32 years ago this week, Israel signed the Oslo Accords. At the ceremony, Israeli Prime Minister Rabin said the following: "Here we stand before you, men whose fate and history have sent on a mission of peace to end, for once and for all, 100 years of bloodshed. Our dream is also your dream." Yes, who in the West doesn't desire and dream of peace? The Islamists, on the other hand, manipulated our dreams to advance their perverted deception of Islamic desires. In the years that followed, we experienced acts of violence, terrorism, murder, suicide bombings, missile fire, all culminating in the horrors of October 7th. In between, those peaceful partners of ours engaged in the abduction and murder of girls from broken homes, assault of women, stabbings and beheadings of men, lynchings. And when people tried to object, to stand up to such actions, stand up for abused women and girls, they are branded and criticized. Sound familiar? This is happening throughout your countries now. It's not only about Israel. Israel is just a canary in the coal mine. Your governments offer what sounds like a rational argument for a policy that, in truth, undermines your own country's interests. By manufacturing a crisis, they construct a false reality, then sell the public on a solution to the very problem they invented. In Israel's case, Rabin and Paris engineered the illusion that we were exhausted by war, worn down by conflict, and that peace was just one more concession away, pushing a narrative that failed in reality. While the dreamers on our side sought peace now and mutual recognition, what we got in return from our partners was a direct assault on the legitimacy of the State of Israel and a denial of the Jewish people's right to self-determination. All of this climaxed in the form of Hamas's campaign of annihilation, backed by a ring of Islamic terrorist regimes committed to our destruction. What allows Israel to stand up to its enemies and withstand the challenges we face is our family and community values and our religious identity. The West is experiencing an identity crisis marked by a deliberate and systematic erosion of its foundational values. British Prime Minister Starmer can sound the alarm over hypothetical threats like the emergency alert test he issued this week, while ignoring the real threat that is already at your doorstep. If you want to survive, you can't keep living in an imaginary dream. You must confront reality, head on, guided by the core values that defined who you are. As I mentioned in my opening, this week, actually Saturday, is the 32nd anniversary to the signing of the Oslo Accords, the agreement between Israel and the PLO signed in Washington, D.C. And I heard last week on Galei Israel Radio an interview with a guest of ours today who has been a guest of mine before, Eldad Beck, who is an Israeli journalist, and he was interviewed by Ido Netanyahu on the program last Friday. It was an interesting conversation. Eldad, at that time, during the signing, I understand from our conversation, he was in Tunisia, and but was very in favor of the peace process and moving forward with it. And he had a very enlightening events in the following years, which I thought would be interesting to share with our viewers as well. So Eldad, thank you for joining me again. You're my first guest that is here once again. So I'm very happy to have you back on.
Thank you very much for inviting me again.
So let's go back 32 years ago, what you believed in, what you were happy about. I can admit myself, I was working at that time with the Prime Minister's office. And although I come from the right wing, I said, you know what, maybe they're right. Maybe we should be going with this dream and following in this. You were already there. What did you see and what happened with you over the years?
Well, first of all, as you mentioned, when the Oslo Accords were signed, I was in Tunisia, and I was sharing the euphoria that peaceniks in Israel had at the time, believing that we are really witnessing a historical change in the history of our nation and in the history of the Middle East. Later on, I was extremely disappointed when Benjamin Netanyahu was elected for the first time to be a prime minister in 1996. And as part of my disappointment, I decided to quit journalism and was recruited by an Austrian organization that was working in the field of assistance to developing countries, and mainly in Africa, but I made a condition that I would join them only if they would allow me to start an operation in the so-called Palestinian territories that were at the time, it was 97, run by the Palestinian autonomy entity. And my idea was to try and use my activity in this Austrian organization. We were getting funding from the Austrian government. We were getting funding from the EU in order to develop projects that would promote peace between Israelis and Palestinians. Now, I was there because the organization is it's an NGO. It's a non-governmental governmental organization, something that I know exists only in Austria. So we had this title of belonging to the Austrian government. And I was actually traveling throughout the so-called Palestinian territories in Gaza, in Judea, in Samaria, in order to find projects that we might develop together and to work on the development of a very specific project that was suggested to us by the person who was elected to be the representative of my organization in Ramallah, which was the upgrading of a school for the blind in the city of Jenin. You wouldn't believe it nowadays, but actually I spent quite a lot of time in Jenin before it became capital of the Palestinian terror.
But this was nothing unusual. There are a lot of groups, also Israeli NGOs, who went in there to try and uplift the peace process to make it on the ground, make it beneficial to the Arabs who lived in Judea and Samaria, and while turning the responsibility over to the PLO to take control over this, all in the vision that this would come out to something positive that would benefit both sides eventually. Because if things are good for the Arabs in Judea and Samaria, they'll embrace the peace process, and Israel will benefit from this as well. So the idea was actually very positive.
Indeed so. And I was really hoping that I would be able to do my very small contribution to promoting the peace process, despite the fact that at the time the Israeli government was seemingly working against the chances of peace. And I was there. I speak Arabic, and I've been before correspondent for the Arab world for some Israeli medias, and I was working with the Palestinians. Most of them didn't know that I was Israeli, and definitely didn't realize that I was speaking Arabic and understanding what they're saying. When I was a journalist, I used to go to these areas and used to hear what they wanted me to pass on as a message to the Israeli public. But then for the first time, I started really understanding what is the reality that the Palestinian Authority was building in the territories, which was completely opposing to the idea of peace. I will give you some examples. First of all, we wanted to develop some technical schools in the so-called refugee camps in Judea and Samaria. That was not allowed by the Palestinian Authority. They told us very, very directly, the refugees is a Palestinian issue, and it's going to stay this way, which means that the Palestinian Authority was not interested at all in upgrading the living conditions of the youngsters living in these camps, giving them any possibility for a better future. And this is how they kept on developing the violence and murderous culture that they brought with them from abroad. Then I was trying to develop peace education projects, and that was also vetoed by the Palestinian Authority. I mean, they had absolutely no interest in promoting peace education. And the last example is what happened with the school for the blinds. We had received actually the services of the world's best expert in this domain of education for the blinds. And unfortunately, for the Palestinians, she was Israeli. The Palestinian side, mainly our representative in Ramallah, who was affiliated with the PLO before, did everything to sabotage her work, despite the fact that she was working seriously and devoted a lot of time in order to build this upgraded school for the blinds in the city of Jenin, which was also the city where our representative came from. But the fact that she was Israeli blinded him so much that he did everything possible to keep her away from the project, and unfortunately he succeeded.
Was he a resident from there, or he was one of those who came from Tunisia with the PLO?
He was one of those who came back with the PLO from Tunisia, and he was also recommended to us by the PLO representative here in Vienna at the time, which means that he was connected to the establishment of the PLO. And this is how it works. People must understand that actually bringing the PLO into the so-called territories Gaza, Judea, and Samaria, has actually opened the gates before violence and terrorism. Before that, despite the so-called occupation of the Israelis, there was a modus vivendi, there was a coexistence between Israel. We tend to forget it already because so much violence has been shed in the last 30 years. But the situation, and even the Palestinians themselves, those who knew the situation before the signature of before the signing of the Oslo Agreement, they admitted that the situation under the so-called Israeli occupation was much, much better than under the real occupation of the elements that came from Tunisia, of the PLO, and later on the occupation of Hamas, which is actually, I mean, I call it occupation, but we should not forget that they were democratically elected into.
Exactly, because most of the people became fed up with the PLO. I just want to say I grew up in Ashkelon in the 70s and in the 80s, and we had a lot of connections with Gaza. First off, most Gazans found employment in Ashkelon and in the towns in the south of Israel, in factories, in the municipalities, in construction. They were coming in and out very freely. We were going into Gaza. There's something none of us would even consider today. Back in that day, we would go to the restaurants along the beaches. It was cheaper for us to take care of our cars there, for example. We would do that. So we had all that experience. And so this idea of bringing in the PLO that we were told were the only representative of the Palestinian people, if we recognize them, there will be peace. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. So you were working with these projects. You were witnessing this. I, at the other side, was working with the government, as I mentioned, and I was seeing this with the journalists. While Israeli journalists were very receiving, and a lot of these Arab journalists from Judea and Samaria were coming into Jerusalem, were hanging out with them. I also know Arabic, and you could hear the conversations. While on the Israeli side, it was very accepting and imagining a future. They were very pragmatic in the sense that they also knew where the PLO was going with this, and they knew who they had to be in line with in order to continue working, meaning they were either with the PLO or in Gaza with Hamas, or they couldn't be employed. But they had nothing. The whole concept of peace, as we saw it, was not the way they were seeing it. They were seeing it as something totally different.
The whole idea of two-state solution that is being still, you still have some of your trying to push for it, was not existing. In all the places that I've been visiting there, and it was very clear that they wanted to see the destruction of the state of Israel. This was indeed an experience, a personal experience, that made me completely understand with whom we are working. And unfortunately, very shortly after I stopped working for this organization, the second Intifada broke, which was something that you could have expected due to the incitement and hate education that the PLO brought with it into the so-called Palestinian territories. And actually now, 32 years later, we are dealing with generations over generations of young Palestinians who were indoctrinated only with hate, racial hate against Jews. And unfortunately, they have existed. The PLO and the Hamas brought upon them so much violence by hitting up the conflicts with the different steps that we have lived through in the last 32 years, like terrorist attacks, and Israel reacts, and then the 7th of October, which was really a traumatic experience for the Israelis, and the appropriate answer to it by Israel. So at the end of the day, somebody must say that the PLO and the Oslo agreements have been a disaster for the Palestinians themselves. And
Exactly.
I'm not talking about the Israelis. It
All right.
also a disaster for the Israelis because we stopped counting the Israelis that have died because of terrorist attacks that were executed by PLO and Hamas and Jihad people. But for the Palestinians themselves, it's a terrible catastrophe. And instead of trying to learn from the mistakes of the past, we see mainly in Europe nowadays the perseverance in trying to advance failed idea that have only brought upon Israelis and Palestinians pain, sorrow, and death and destruction. And when really asked oneself, are the Europeans at all interested in a peaceful solution in the Middle East or not? Because by the way they are reacting, by holding to this idea of two-state solution, which is obviously nowadays, especially after the 7th of October, that it's not going to happen. By holding to it, the Europeans, the EU, have become the main obstacle to peace in the Middle East. I believe that even among the Arab world, there is much broader acceptance of the idea that the Palestinians are the problem of themselves. The Palestinians are the core of the problem. And as long as you don't deal with this problem, you would not advance to any peace in the Middle East. In the Arab world, they understand it. In Europe, they are actually state by state, mainly in Western Europe, they give in to the pressure, to the terrorist pressure of the Palestinians, of the pro-Palestinian Palestinian forces, mainly coming from the left, who are actually, the same way that they are dealing with Israel and wanting to finish off Israel, they want to finish off the European
Exactly.
and this massive pro-Palestinian protests that you see in Berlin, in London, in Paris, in Madrid, it's not pro-Palestine or anti-Israel. It's coming to the Europeans and telling them, guys, we are the new masters of the situation of the land, okay? And you will do exactly what we tell you. Now, it starts with changing the policy toward Israel, but it will go on with accepting Sharia laws and with actually making Islam a replacement for other religions in Europe.
And they can look at what we've gone through here. On the one side, you have nearly 2 million Arabs who have been since 1948 citizens with all rights in the state of Israel, though the deception goes around saying it's an apartheid, etc. But those who are honest enough to come and see it for themselves, you have that population that enjoy all the rights of the state of Israel, would not want to be part of a Palestinian Authority. And then you have those who are not held accountable, not demanded to fulfill their commitments on the Arab side in Judea and Samaria and Gaza. You mentioned the Intifada. Also, this month, in about 10 days, in 2 weeks, actually, it'll be the 25th anniversary of the Intifada that broke out here. So when they talk about globalizing the Intifada, what do you have to globalize if the Jews are here in the state of Israel? What are they exactly doing? It's exactly what you're saying. They're taking their Intifada against the West. And as the Iranians always put it very simply, we're the little Satan. The United States, the West, are the great Satan. So they're going to have these things on their doorsteps. They're already dealing with it.
Absolutely. This is what we are seeing in Europe today. And unfortunately, we see too many governments that are sitting, that are giving in, that are actually working with these devilish forces in order to bring the end of Europe under the cover of human rights and rights of immigrants and rights of refugees and whatever. What we are seeing, unfortunately, today is the widespreading occupation of large territories within Europe. And the Europeans, unfortunately, they start. You can see that in England, for example, in Ireland, in Spain, there are some initiatives to stop this current from flooding those countries. But unfortunately, I think that it is coming too late, and it is definitely too little.
So you travel extensively for your work as a journalist in Europe, in Eastern Europe, in Austria, Germany, particularly. The insights that you see at the moment, and is there anything that you can see from Israel that can help them perhaps address those people who are awakened to the realities, can help them address the threat that is on their doorstep at the moment?
I think that first of all, we have to be very clear in our messages to the world, especially to the West. I think that if indeed we are considering the possibility of annexing parts of the Judea and Samaria to Israel, I think that we must have very clear messages about the right that we have over those lands.
Exactly.
There should be, I believe, some more work coming from the Israeli side in order, first of all, to let our friends around the world, and I think that there are not that few, feel again that we know what we are doing. Oslo actually confused many of our friends because what happened was that we sort of abandoned our narrative, and we started working for the false Palestinian narrative, saying that they are the indigenous population of this country. They have been there for centuries. They have been there forever, etc., etc., and they are the owners of the land. And we just started spreading these ideas instead of saying no. The land is ours. Most of those called Palestinians are immigrants or descendants of immigrants from other Arab countries or even Muslim countries, who came to settle down in this piece of land because they believed that their economic situation would get better, which it did, by the way. And here again, you see parallels with the situation in Europe. Yeah, all those people are coming to Europe in order to get better living conditions, living mostly on the expenses of the Europeans. But we really have to say that the land is ours. And if we accept certain compromises, it's not because we give away our right on this land, it's because we are willing to share. And since the other side is unwilling to share, there is no reason whatsoever to still believe in these ideas of two-state solutions whatsoever. We must be extremely clear with what we are saying to the world. The Palestinians, or the so-called Palestinians, have had their chances again and again, and they have missed all these chances. Instead of making Gaza a prosperous, with all the money that they have received billions and billions from all over the world. Look what they have done. Look what destruction and death they have brought upon themselves. So the problem is the Palestinians, and we have to be extremely clear in saying these things to the world.
Eldad Beck, hopefully the world will understand, and before it gets as bad for them as it happened for us here on October 7th, I want to thank you for joining us again. Wish you a Shana Tova as the Jewish New Year approaches. I'm sure we'll reach out to you again to get your insights. And I want to thank our viewers for joining us once again here on Straight Up on JNS TV, and look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you.